Yes, in the interview with the HARDLINE magazine and rock bottom John Boegehold, I hope it's pronounced rightly.
Boegehold, Buckhold, close enough.
Boegehold,
I've heard it a million different
John
ways
Boegehold.
over the years.
Okay,
Yeah, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
He is the producer, keyboardist, synthesizer player, of the pattern-seeking animals. Yeah, hi, nice to have you in this interview.
Nice to be
It's
here.
it's about the new album Spooky Action at a Distance. It will be released in late October.
Right.
So Spooky Action at a Distance, it's an expression by Albert Einstein. So
Correct.
how did you come to this album title? What was your inspiration to use this a little bit sophisticated album title?
Well, I watched this. I subscribed to a YouTuber named Sabine Hassenfelder, who's a German physicist, and every week or even more, she'll put out a video talking about different scientific or astronomy, whatever terms, more in terms of easy to understand. It's not so technical. And one day she was doing something about quantum physics, quantum entanglement, quantum mechanics, etc., which I've always had a problem trying to understand. I still don't really grasp it. I get about 90% there, and it just doesn't connect with my mind. So I just try every once in a while. And she was talking about quantum entanglement and a conversation Einstein had with someone overseas in a letter. And in the letter, he originally wrote it in German, which is uh, made into English. I think, and people have told me it's exactly, but the translation comes out to spooky action at a distance. And it was about how particles light years apart react at the same way at the same time, even though they're, light years apart. And he saw some problems with that part of the theory, I guess, and he called it spooky action at a distance. And then just the minute I heard it, I thought it was a great phrase and unusual.
Yeah,
And if you go put it into Google right now, it's all about Einstein and physics and everything, which is great for me. It has nothing to do with the album, it has nothing to do with the music. I just thought it was a great phrase and different, so I just went with it.
of course it is. And your music is very versatile and intricate, but
Mhm.
it is accessible as well. So, how did you realize the balance between musical expression and song orientation?
Well, just from I think from a personal level, because I've been listening to rock and prog rock and whatever for forever, since I was a teenager. And the songs that always stuck with me were the ones that have like a memorable singing or memorable part or a sing along chorus. It was something that would stick in your head. I always like that. So
Mm,
to me, when I'm writing a song, if it doesn't have that, uh, I just don't feel like finishing it because to me, from a personal level, it won't connect with me. I might listen to something once or twice because it has cool instrumentation or instrumental parts. But if there's not something I can latch onto that way, I'm just not going to listen to it again. So I start out most of the time with something fairly basic, a verse and a chorus and singable, then expand to there. And if it goes into something longer form or more intricate, great. If it doesn't, fine. It's all good.
yeah, it's a good balance. And Window to the World is a very catchy and compact song.
Right.
It is your first single of the album, and you have produced a great video for this song as well. So, what
Mm-hmm.
stands behind this song? Was it hard to create this video?
Well, the song was something I wrote years ago with the co-writer Diane Boothby. I was in a band with her, and also Dave Maros from the Pattern Seeking Animals.
Mm,
And it's a song we did a demo of a couple times, but it never really worked with the band we were in. And last year when I was writing this album, I came across it. As most writers, most songwriters have a zillion things they've done in the past they draw from and they bring it back. And I looked at it and thought, oh, I know the way to make this work in this context. So I rewrote it and shuffled up the sections. I'm really happy with the way that turned out. And the video, that's something where the budget for videos is very, very, very low. and we needed to do 4 of them. And since we weren't going to be playing, getting
Hmm.
everyone together because we're all in different parts of the country, which would have gone over the video budget just for one of those, we decided to do something which was interesting to look at, rather than just putting the album cover up there. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah, yeah.
and and I had seen some AI uh, artwork or graphics and animation, which I really liked, and I contacted a couple artists, animators who work with it. And I just think the video for that and Somewhere North of Nowhere, the other one, turned out great. And although AI is a little divisive right now, because a lot of people say, "Oh, you're going with the computer's doing all the work," and I understand it to some point, but I think the smart animators are using it as a tool. It's not like you can just press a button and it makes a video. You have to prompt it to do all sorts of different things and movements and characters and colors and styles. There's a lot that goes into it. Um, so I think it's like all technology. If you don't adapt to technology, you're going to be less left by the wayside,
Hmm.
because that technology is going to happen and take over whether you like it or not. So you kind of have to make that choice. So I just decided to go with it, and I'm really happy with the way it turned out. Even though we get a couple of people, saying, "Oh, AI, we don't like it." Well, okay, that's
Oh,
fine.
it's
I
good.
understood.
It's a different approach, I guess. It's good and very modern, and
Yeah, I
yeah,
think maybe in another few months or year or whatever, everyone's going to be doing it, and people will get tired of it. But for right now, I thought it
yeah,
was the
yeah.
right way to go.
Yeah, and the opposite, for example, He Once Was is a 12-minute song with time and rhythm changes
Hmm.
and an exciting saxophone contribution. It is a great song, and I didn't realize at the first moment the length of the song because it's so interesting and versatile. So,
Great.
what stands behind this song musically and lyrically?
Lyrically, well, musically, that the first part of the song where it's just the piano and the vocal and the flute, that's a melody I've had around for a while, and I've been trying to use it in different songs and never clicked. So finally, I came up with something I really liked, and I started writing a song. And at first, I thought that'll probably be like 3 or 4 minutes long. But then, as I went, things kept presenting themselves to me where I thought, oh, it'd be cool to have this section in here. Then maybe it should do this. And by the time I finished, it was 12 minutes long. Lyrically, I was reading a book called uh, Facemaker by Lindsay Fitzharris, who's an English writer, and it's about a plastic surgeon who made great advancements after World War One, treating people who came back from the war with disfigurements and whatever. And it's a fascinating book. And in it, there was a vignette of one of the soldiers she worked on who originally didn't get into the war because he was some kind of a conscientious objector. When he finally went, he went through just hell. And I thought it'd be interesting to write something along this line, although it's not something if you were to listen to the song, you would immediately think, oh, that's what it's about. But
Hmm.
that's the image I had was a guy coming back from the war and meeting someone in town, telling his life story. So I kind of went with more imagery based on that, rather than something which is immediately obvious to who's ever listening. But yeah, the way the song built up, and I'm really happy. I'm really proud of the way that one turned out. Yeah, the sax solo is funny because sax
Yeah,
is another one of those divisive things. A couple of the guys in the band didn't want to have sax in there because they just don't like saxophone. And then me and
it's
Dave, the
good.
bass player, I love sax. I love it, but some people just don't, and it's always been like that. But I always used to love it when groups like Pink Floyd or Supertramp or whatever would come out, and all of a sudden there's a sax solo, and I always just thought that was great. So, and the guy who played the sax solo did just an incredible job with the solo. So, yeah, I'm really
It's
happy with that one.
great, yeah, of course. And in your band, there are four outstanding musicians. So, could you describe the songwriting process? Are you the main songwriter, or were all members in charge of songwriting for this new album?
I write everything for the album, although a couple of them, like I said, they are from older songs which I wrote with Diane, who's also doing a lot of backing vocals on the album. But generally, I write everything, and every once in a while, like Ted Leonard, who's the vocalist and the guitar player, is a great writer, and I'm always trying to get him to write. He wrote a couple songs in the last album which I loved, but he's one of those people who like I think most writers write from personal experience and only write when there's something bad going on in their lives. You know,
Mhm,
is whether a divorce or someone dying or
mhm.
whatever,
Yeah.
and everything's good with him in the past few years. So he says he's just not inspired to write. So even though I keep bugging him, maybe on the next album I'll finally get him to come up with some more stuff. But no, it's me. It's all, you know. It's
Okay.
basically me. Yeah.
It's so some elements of your music remind me a little bit to folk music, but I'm not quite sure. So what do you think? Am I right, or is it just my mad inner
No,
feeling?
I listen and have always listened to a wide variety of music: folk, country, pop, K-pop, rock, hard rock, death metal, whatever. It's all good to me. And the folk part of it, in He Once Was, for an example, I in the middle section, it's a definite folk type of sound because of the way the
Hmm.
vocals are done and the acoustic instruments. I'm playing like an acoustic guitar and a mandolin and a resonator guitar, which is something you don't necessarily hear in Prague a lot. But that vibe, it's very folky. I could see that definitely.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. And another piece it'll show up, but I tend to throw in different genres into the songs I write just out of nowhere, just because it sounds right at the time, and I don't have any boundaries as far as that
It's
goes.
good. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
It's a good attitude. And I have read that you have chosen a different recording studio and a different production process this time. So
Mhm.
could you describe it? What was different and what was your idea behind it?
Sure. The past three albums, and I've worked with him before. Rich Mauser at the Mouse House, who's done a lot of different prog acts. He's mixed and mastered, and he's great and everything. And this time, I'd kind of been toying with just going with something else, just to shake things up after a few albums. But I like so much what he did, I could never make the moves. It's like, I guess what you call it, golden handcuffs. You know, you're
Hmm.
taught to it because it's so good. But last year, when I was ready to record some of the drum parts, he was busy. He was out touring. I think he might have been out with Transatlantic or something, mixing. And he said, I can't even get back in the studio to do these drums for like 2 or 3 months. And at that point, I thought, okay, I said, I'm just going to have to go somewhere else. He said, no problem. I completely understand. So I went with a guy named Frank Rosado, who I've worked with in the past. I've known him for a long, long, long time. And he has a
Okay.
great studio. He has a very different approach as far as engineering and mixing, which I really like. It's just very different from the way we did it in the past. And as an added bonus, he's only about 10 minutes from where I live. So it's a very easy drive over there, where Rich's place was through LA traffic. This could be 45 minutes or an hour each way. And that was awesome. So it's, yeah, it was, half out of wanting to try things different and half out of just logistics and the opportunity to do it. Yeah, I'm
Mhm.
really happy with working with Frank. So it turned out really good.
And I saw it on your Facebook channel. You started, like you told last year, last summer, with this fourth album, recording the fourth album, but the third album was released at that time. So, did you write all these songs in one creative rush, or how would I see it?
What I usually do is I start writing just because I like writing, and I would be writing if I didn't have anything for it to go to. I just like the whole process. But
Hmm.
I generally start writing right after we turn in an album, and I start writing for the next one. And what I always do is I'll start 2, 3 songs and get them to the point where they're workable and they're full songs and ready to go. And then I start thinking of the other type of material I want to go with those, that will fit in with the whole vibe. I always try and stay away from things which I've already done, just to not repeat types of things. But a lot of times, which I do, which I know a lot of writers do, is they go back to old material, some things that weren't finished. I've done it on every album. Uh, Things that weren't finished at the time or didn't turn out the way you wanted, and I would look at them, and I think just with the passage of time and just maybe my skills developing more, I look at songs I wasn't able to make work and immediately think, oh yeah, I know exactly what to do to make this song work. So I'll end up using parts from older songs, or rewriting them. So there's a few of them on this album, which is kind of the way I always work. And then you just write from there. You just start writing songs. If all of a sudden you've written more slow tempo ones, you start thinking, oh, I
Hmm.
better write something more up tempo, or vice versa. Or if there's something which is really dark and mysterious, oh, I want to make something more happy now.
Yeah.
Just to get some contrast on the album so everything doesn't sound samey, I think.
Hmm.
And that's the process. So I'm always writing. I've already started writing for the next one since
Oh
this album
yeah.
was turned in like 4 or 5 months ago.
So now you have got the ideas for the next album or some
Oh
songs
yeah.
in your mind for the yeah for the album in 1.5 year or so, no?
Yeah, I've already started it. I've got like halfway there. I think we're going to start recording drums for the next one, maybe
Oh,
next month.
great.
Next month at some time. Yeah,
Okay.
at least on half of the new songs.
Okay. And so how would you see your musical progress from the first album to the fourth album? Is there a progress or is it just one style? And is it a new style this time because it differs from the one before? I would say it's a different sounds are included. So how would you see it, your musical progress from the first to the fourth album?
I think in the first of the three, since we recorded them at the same studio with Rich, and he
Hmm.
mixed and everything, there wasn't as much of a change between the first three. Although I usually try and do something different to come up with maybe a different vibe or overall emotion on them. So those are kind of consistent, and I thought we made strides in a few different ways there. So the albums sound different. I think that's always the problem when a band puts out too many albums. A lot of times it just sounds like, this album just sounds like the last one, stuff left over from the last album.
Yeah.
But I try and get away from that. The one thing, besides working with Frank, and that's in the studio we worked in this time, the engineer, he has a different viewpoint as far as how to make things sound and the way he does things. And I wanted to concentrate more on the vocals for this album.
Hmm.
Um, I've always been really, really big on great background vocals. But in Pattern Seeking Animals, Ted is obviously a fantastic singer, and Jimmy, the drummer, fantastic vocalist. And he does a lot of the backing vocal parts. But neither Dave and I, although we can sing, have a really pleasing voice. And
Hmm.
I've always been a fan of the good three-part harmony with the different vocal blends, whether it's the Beatles or Crosby, Stills, Nash or Fleetwood Mac, whatever. They have the three voices that sound unique to each other but have a great blend. So in this one, besides Ted and Jimmy, I went to some outside vocalists, female vocalists. As I would go through a song, uh, I would try and imagine what a third vocal, the type of texture we want with it, and find a vocalist to do that type of thing. And I think worked out really well. So yeah, I think there's three or four different female backing vocals
Hmm.
in
Okay.
the mix on this one. Yeah,
Hmm. And I think it's a double CD, and there's a bonus material included. Is it just for a
right.
limited time, or was it your approach to realize, yeah, a two album set?
Well,
How did it come? Yeah.
originally the plan was to just do the one album, but I realized uh, we had some live material we done live, which it's just the time isn't right for us to release a live album at this point, whether the market
Hmm.
isn't there or whatever. So we had some recordings of some of the live stuff, which is really good. So I thought originally there was going to be a couple bonus tracks of original material, maybe with one live track. But then the live stuff was so good, it's like a half an hour of it on the second track or on the second bonus disc. And plus one other song, There Goes My Baby, which didn't quite fit with the other ones. So that's on there. Um, but from the beginning, we wanted to make it a two CD set. I just wasn't sure exactly what was going to be on the second one. Although that's the two CD is only for the initial Digipack release. For the later the jewel case release, the one CD
Oh
set
yeah. Okay.
will come out later, and that will include the one bonus track, uh, the studio one on
Yeah.
that disc.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, right.
but won't have the live stuff.
Okay. Oh yeah. Interesting idea. And it's an interesting cover as well. I guess all your covers have got a special note, a special expression. And
Yeah.
this time it's a really good realization of the album title. Who did it for you, or did you bring in your own ideas for this cover, or how did it happen?
Uh, Thomas Everhart, who's a fantastic artist, who has done hundreds or thousands of album covers over the years. So he did the first couple of ours, and if you look, he just does a lot of stuff for Inside Out and other artists, a lot
Hmm.
of rock things. So he's great to work with and comes up with great stuff. So I just said, here's the title of the album, and I gave him an idea of what it means. And I said the only thing I had in mind was maybe a guy looking up to the sky or through a telescope or something looking far
Hmm.
off. That I gave him very little hint, and that's what he came up with. And with the exception of me wanting to add more of the birds around the telescope,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
exactly what he came up with, and I was so happy with it. It's just I love the cover. I think it's
Hmm.
great.
It's a good cover, of course.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
And you are related, the pattern-seeking animals are related to Spock's Beard. You have written songs, yeah, for Spock's Beard, and
Right.
the
Right.
three other guys are or were included in the lineup of the band. So where
Right.
do you see the musical differences and maybe the resemblances between the pattern-seeking animals and Spock's Beard?
Well, I wrote and co-wrote with them for 7 albums until 2018, and then Pattern Seeking Animals started. Obviously, the main thing is Ted's voice is obviously it ties between them. Dave's
Mm,
bass playing.
of
Jimmy was the
course.
drummer for Jimmy was the drummer for a couple albums, although he's not with them now. So there's the commonality there, and but I think overall, just the general production idea and the songwriting and the approach is very different. Rio, who's a keyboard player in Spock's Spirit, who's a tremendous keyboard player, he and
Hmm.
I just approach things very, very differently. So I think there's a big difference in the just sonically in the keyboards and the way they're arranged and put together, the sounds, all that kind of stuff. Um, and Ted, who doesn't play very little guitar in Spock's Beard, is the main guitar player in Pattern Seeking Animals. He has a very different style from Alan from Spock's Beard. Ted's a great player, very melodic,
Hmm.
does great solos and comes up with cool parts and everything. So I understand the comparison, and people will always compare it, but to me it sounds very different. Although in some of the stuff I wrote with Spock's that I also produce, there's similarities there, obviously. But I think as the albums go on, we're developing more of our own
Hmm.
stylistically, even with some of the same people.
Okay, no, this was my idea as well. There's the semblances, but also it sounds different, different sounds. You mentioned it. Your keyboard playing is different to the one from Rio,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's intricate and very interesting in a special way. So, who were your musical role models as a keyboardist? How did you learn all these, yeah, various keyboard sounds and
Well,
synthesizer sounds?
I think I'm not originally a keyboard player. I play enough keyboards to write with. Same with guitar. I would never be considered a virtuoso by any stretch of the imagination. I can barely play what I write half the time, but I play enough to be able to get it into the computer and alter it that way. But conceptually, I think my influences for keyboards are more the people who are textural rather than like Rick Wakeman or Keith Emerson or John Lord or who are flashier,
Hmm.
great, intricate, great players. I always like the players like Tony Banks from Genesis or Nick Rhodes from Duran Duran, people like that who are more into the texture over of the of the production rather than flashy solos or great parts that stand out by themselves. I like doing it more to fit within the music. And as far as sounds, I've always been fascinated with keyboard sounds and synthesizers. And back in the 80s and 90s, all the techno groups and the programming they would do. And I keep up on a ton of current stuff through current pop and K-pop and J-pop and all that stuff, where the producers and players are not there to be flashy, but to do new, unique sounds that fit within the song. And they're using all the completely up to date synthesizers and sounds and production values. So I tend to go more toward that than the standard keyboard sounds. I try to anyway. Obviously, I still use
Hmm.
piano and organ and mellotron and all that kind of stuff, but I generally tend to like to go with more intricate textures and things
Hmm.
which are in the background you don't necessarily notice. There's three things going on, but you can pick out at any one time if you choose to. It's like
Hmm.
a big stage behind the music and behind the vocals.
Hmm. Yes, okay. And will you go on tour with a new album? And will you be part of a tour or live performances? Because I read on some gigs you weren't playing live, you had guest musicians. So how did it come? And will you go on tour with the Pattern Seeking Animals and this new album?
I am I do not play in a live band for a couple reasons. One, I've just never enjoyed playing live. It's just not my thing. Never liked it. And in the past where I've done it, it's kind of been out of necessity. And besides that, like I said, I'm not a good enough player to play a lot of the stuff that I come up with for the record.
Hmm.
Because a lot of there's, I'll put something basic in, then change it and add parts one at a time. But if I were to have to play some of those parts live, I just technically I couldn't do it. I'm not at the level of the other guys in the band who are all
No.
fantastic. So in the past, we did a couple of festivals and the Cruise to the Edge last year, and so
Mm-hmm.
besides Dave, Ted, and Jimmy, we have two additional players. One, Walter Eno, who's the utility, good singer. He also plays guitar and mandolin and keyboards. And then Dennis Atlas, who's this young, up and coming, great keyboard, great keyboard player, and
Hmm.
he also sings really well. So between those two and the three other members, we were able to come up with pretty much the way it sounds on the record.
Hmm.
But yeah, long story short, I won't be
Oh
going
yeah.
on tour, and we don't have anything lined up right now. We're still looking into it. We have our the feelers out to look for something, but I'm sure as you know over there, it becomes increasingly more difficult to play just financially. During the pandemic, several clubs that you would normally play the stuff in music closed down. So there's
Hmm.
always the issue of that and
Okay.
that type of thing. So, but we have a couple. We're looking at a couple things, but nothing really close to being able to announce at this point.
Okay. Okay. So you are mainly the brain behind the whole project, a studio musician and producer, but
Yeah,
you won't perform live.
correct,
Okay,
correct.
okay, interesting. So, John, do you have further information for your fans that is unmentioned, unasked, unanswered?
Boy, I'm not sure. As obvious, you can get all our music. It'll all be out on October 27th, vinyl, CD, digital, Spotify, all that kind of. It's all out there. Um, and I just hope everyone likes it. I mean, we used on this album. I used a few, like you said, the sax. That's unusual for us. Um, used a lot of flute, different instruments like that, and the cello. We have a string quartet and a couple of the songs, which I think turned out really, really good. Where in the past we've used, an individual violin here or cello or viola here or there.
Hmm.
So it's just more of more music from us, and hopefully people will like it.
I'm
A lot
sure
went into it. Yeah.
it's a really great, yeah, album. I enjoyed it
Oh,
very much.
thanks.
And
Thank you.
so, how would you see it? I read recently that the situation, yeah, for hard rock, metal, or progressive rock is a little bit worse in America. It's not the best situation because these genres are not so popular in the United States. Is that right, or how would you see it?
Yeah, I think there are fans, but I think there's definitely more of a concentration of fans in Europe. Um, uh, for whatever reason, maybe just because there's so much other stuff happening here. So it's tougher to play live here, if for no other reason, just the distances involved. If you play in Germany, for example, when whatever city you play in, you can get on a bus and within a few hours be in another country at another capital and playing there. Here, I'm in LA and we do most of the gigs in on the East Coast, probably where that's where the concentration mostly of prog fans is. It's, almost 3,000 miles away. So
Yeah,
it just
okay.
it's just getting the transportation and
Of
gear and
course,
everything.
yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's tougher. I wish it were different. I think it was different years ago because Prague at the time, when you had groups like Yes and Genesis and ELP, had much, much, much larger audiences. So it was
Hmm.
easier for them to come and do a tour of the U.S. and they go from Detroit to Chicago to Kansas City or whatever. But with prog groups, unless you're at the top unless it's like transatlantic or something like that, with porcupine tree, things like that, where there's a wider audience, they can do it. It's tougher, I think, for most prog bands to do.
Okay. But this will change with this new album. You will have a broad
Absolutely.
audience. Yeah.
Exactly. I'm putting in an order for my Lamborghini right now. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good.
Yeah. Yeah. But
Okay,
yeah, we'll see. We'll
well,
see how it
these
goes.
were my questions. John, thank you for this nice interview. Have
Nope.
great
No problem.
success with the new
Thank you.
album and further
Thank you.
albums, good songwriting, and greetings to or regards to the rest of the
I will let them know.
band.
Yeah.
Okay, John,
Very
thank
good.
you very much. Keep on
Thank you.
rocking. It's a special
Absolutely.
German expression. Keep on rocking.
Human, I haven't heard that before.
No,
Keep
never
on
before.
Very good. Okay.
Okay,
Thanks.
bye
Good seeing you.
bye. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye.